Let's head over to Visual Studio for the first time in this module and see how we can create a few more classes and group them in namespaces. Then we'll use these classes, and for that we'll need to bring in the namespace using a using statement. As we can see here, our employee class that we've now been working with for a while is by default in a namespace called Bethany Spy Shop HRM. That is not a coincidence. If we go to the project properties, we will see indeed that there is a default namespace set, and it is set to Bethany Spy Shop HRM. That is a default. You can change that default, but it means that every new class that you put in the root of the project, that is going to get namespace Bethany Spy Shop HRM. So that means that employee type, work task, and employee are all in that namespace Bethany Spy Shop HRM. Program, however, is not. That is why we needed to bring in the Bethany Spy Shop HRM using statement here. That gave us access to the types that live within the Bethany Spy Shop HRM namespace. So that is why that using statement was required here. Now, in most applications, we won't place all of our classes, or our types, I should say, directly in the root of the project. We'll create some subfolders, and those typically correspond with the namespaces. Say that, for example, all the classes that we've made so far have to do with HR. We could very easily go here on the project, right-click, and add a new folder, and let's call that HR. The default, what Visual Studio will do, and that's typically also what I follow, is that all the types that I create within this HR folder will be in a namespace Bethany Spy Shop HRM.hr, so the concatenation of the root namespace with the name of the folder. And this can even include subfolders, and we just place a dot in between them. If we just let Visual Studio create a new class in here, let's create a class called test, just to test this out. You will see that the namespace becomes Bethany Spy Shop HRM.hr. Let's remove this again, because I don't want to clutter my code with anything I'm not going to be using. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to clean up our application a little bit. I'm going to move the employee. I'm going to pick it up and move it into this HR folder. And I'm going to do the same with employee type and work task, because all these classes seem to have to do with HR-related functionality. Now, just moving them didn't do any changes. If you look back at employee, we'll still see that they are in the Bethany Spy Shop HRM namespace. The namespace is really a grouping here. I want to therefore also reflect this grouping in code, and I'm going to add .hr here to let the namespace correspond with the folder. Again, it's not required to have them correspond with the folder. I tend to typically do that in most of my applications. I can do that manually here on the employee type as well, and I can also do that here on work task. And while we're at it, we can also let Visual Studio do it automatically. As you can see here, we can click on the light bulb again. You can let the namespace be changed automatically by Visual Studio. Now, if we go to the program, we'll see a lot of red squigglies. Our employee and our employee type can't be found anymore. And using Bethany Spy Shop HRM is grayed out. So we can probably remove that. Now, employee was in the Bethany Spy Shop HRM.hr namespace, so we'll need to bring that namespace again with a using statement. So I can again go in here on the light bulb and bring in the using statement. And everybody is happy again. Now, say that we're also in our application are going to build in some functionality around accounting. Well, then we can create another folder here, of course. Let's call that accounting. And I'm going to bring in a few classes. I've now brought in two other classes that have to do with accounting, account and customer. And they are in the Bethany Spy Shop HRM.accounting namespace. If we go back to the program and we want to create a customer this time, we can again do what we did before. We can start typing customer. By default, Visual Studio won't find it. We actually need to bring in the using statement. We've seen that. But what we also can do is fully qualify the type name. I can say here Bethany Spy Shop HRM.accounting.customer. So then this is the fully qualified name. The fully qualified names means that I'm going to include not only the type name, but also its namespace in the name. And I can also create a new variable of that type, and that's going to be a new customer. There we go. Most of the time, you won't be doing this, but if you see this fully qualified name, it basically means that the using statement is not being used, and we name the class with its full name, including the namespace.